Okay, we're like, buenos días a todos todavía. Good morning. We will start our press conference. We will start here. Any questions? Telemundo.
Sobre el asunto de los maestros.
Mujica, you mentioned the matter regarding teachers, and I wanted to know if the board has a position in regards to the disparity between teachers who have a bachelor's degree in their preparation versus those that have a master's degree or a doctorate degree that are receiving less compensation than those that are in comparison to those that have a bachelor's degree, which contradicts the principles of a teaching career for teachers to be able to continue their studies and receive additional income. Is there any talk of improving the educational system, improving the conditions for teachers? What?
Education and the teachers are the priority in education. So that's number one. And I think that's demonstrated in the fact that teacher salaries have gone up almost 40%. There's been 3 separate times that teacher salaries have been increased, and they've gone up 40%. But you're right, the way it was increased last time, and the government actually did this with federal funds initially, and then we adopted those increases and funded them with the general fund. But the way the government did it was same increase for every teacher, no matter the education, whether they had a bachelor's or a master's degree. And that's probably not ideal, right, when you're doing the salary structure. So now as the first thing for the Department of Education is we need to understand how they're going to manage with the resources, and the non-recurring resources go away. And when it comes to the teacher salaries and evaluations, that is something that we want to work on with the government and establish a system like in civil service reform where there are requirements, right, whether it's educational requirements, whether it's performance requirements, additional education, and if we're going to do an increase, have it related to those kinds of things. So it is something that we envision working on over the near future with the government.
Thank you. WKQ.
Muy buenos días.
Good morning. Most of the population in Puerto Rico is composed of elderly folk, and we have seen that a lot of professionals need to stop working in order to take care of their aging family members. In that sense, we've seen municipalities that in this new year or this new term, they don't have enough federal funds to provide services such as the Ama de Llaves program. So what priorities or what measures are being taken in face of this reality that is also affecting the economy of Puerto Rico?
We agree with all of those statistics. Those are the facts. And that's also why in this year's budget, the one that's current, for the first time, we added $15 million specifically for municipalities to fund the Ama de Llaves program, and they received 0 funding from the central government for their efforts on that program. Central government has their own program, but the municipalities have been filling the gaps, and that's why we gave them $15 million this year. As federal funding goes away, this is part of why we're saying we need to do long-term budgets and multi-years, because it's not enough to solve the solution this year, because as federal funds go away, they're going to leave gaps. And we have to have a real assessment of what are we going to do. Are we going to cut those services? Are we going to try to fund those services? And where are we going to find the resources to do that in this environment? And that's part of the long-term budget strategy that we want to work on with the government.
Another question?
Yes, en el aspecto de ¿cuánto tiempo tomaría ver, por ejemplo?
Yes, in regards to how long it would take to implement those funds for municipalities, how long do you consider that would take? Because there is a current need that represents an emergency for those families. So how do you predict that time will look? Will it be this year, next year, 6 months?
We already gave the municipalities their allocations for the Ama de Llaves program. So if it hasn't gone to the municipalities yet, then that's probably something that we need to work on with the central government, but it was recently made. That decision was just made, then it goes, OGP has to make the decision, and then they have to distribute the money to the municipalities. But our decision on who gets the money and how that money will be distributed is already done for this year. And now we should start working on what we're doing for next year.
On another topic,
Yes. Thank you. Referente
In
a-
regards to the measures that Donald Trump is taking in regards to states and territories and the education system, in regards to that, what measures are you predicting you will have in face of what the White House might do?
Look, it's unclear what's going to happen with Washington with regarding to the Department of Education. But the first thing that we know, right, because we can't plan for the unknown, but what we do know is the federal funding that we do have is expiring and is going to go away. And it is a significant portion of the department's budget. So we will be asking the department for a plan, like they always had before. There was a plan, a 5-year plan previously, and asking them for a plan going forward. How will you manage in the absence of those federal funds? And then if there's anything else that comes out of Washington with the Department of Education, like every other municipality in the country, we're going to have to manage to that.
thank you. We have vocero here.
Buenos días.
How does the board react to the request from bondholders to the request to lift the state of bankruptcy in PREPA?
It's currently being reviewed by our attorneys, and I'm sure we'll get a recommendation from them shortly to how to react.
Will the board be opposed to the petition of the mediation team of contracting a financial advisory team costing $1 million when the fiscal plan itself establishes that everything generated by the authority should go to operational expenses and improvements?
Just to be clear on that, because it's been reported that that is the board's contract. You're right. That is not the board's contract. The board actually specifically said, right, we're not negotiating that contract. It was negotiated by the mediators. The mediators and the board as the representative had to present it to the court, and that is the entirety of that. So the mediators had that negotiation, their advisors. We didn't negotiate that contract. And the mediators are entitled to the professionals that they think are necessary for mediation. The question is, right, perhaps, right, how long, right, will the mediation stay in place for?
Just the history of that process, when the court ordered mediation, selected the mediations, et cetera, the professionals' retentions, the mediators asked the board to facilitate that process. And that's why the board is involved in filing with the court, et cetera. But they're not our advisors, they're the mediators' advisors. And it's up to the court in examining the request to make the judgment.
Okay. Would you have another one? I have a follow-up here. Go ahead and then follow up.
Pero eso quiere decir que la Junta
Does that mean that the board itself cannot be opposed to what the mediation team has asked for in terms of that contract?
It does not mean that the board cannot oppose it.
Thank you, Chairman. Follow up here.
en el mismo tema, la gobernadora ha expresado reservas.
The governor has expressed reservations regarding that contract, and the governor has expressed publicly that she would like to understand. The governor has opposed that contract. She publicly said yesterday that she didn't know what purpose it served, whether it was to continue litigation or what. So what explanation do you give the governor in terms of what's going to happen with that contract in terms of the mediation and what's up with those objections? How are you receiving her reservations and objections to that?
The governor can't if the governor's office is opposed to what the mediators have proposed, right? They are welcome to object to it if that is their position. If that is their position on it. Again, we advanced it through that, and I'll leave it up. Arthur, do we need to go through if she wants to object to that contract,
Oh,
do we have to advance that, or does it have to go through us, or can they object to it on their own?
They certainly have a right to object to it, like, well, let me not answer the question until I fully understand it. The question is, do the mediators have the right to do what?
Does the governor have the ability,
I'm sorry, okay.
to object to it, and does that objection have to come through the board?
The governor's objection, no. The governor has proceeded, each governor, since the inception of the board, has proceeded separately in terms of exercising whatever rights they have within the court. They have their own counsel that can process it. What I describe with the mediation is really just a simple convenience of process that the board assumed. But certainly the governor can take whatever position she deems as appropriate, and has the lawyers and has often presented matters before the court, objected to things before the court, including objecting to any matter throughout, whatever it's PREPA, the Commonwealth, et cetera.
Thank you, Chairman. We have from Octus Kevin Mead another question. Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you. In relation to the PREPA fiscal plan, how confident is the board in the system operator expense estimates, given the apparent operator shortcomings that have been reflected in various PREB proceedings? And secondly, what is the status of the board's plans to hire an independent consultant to pressure test those expense estimates?
Yeah. The operators have been in place for a few years now. They're in the best position to understand what the system need is. So that's the best information we have, right? We know for certain that the system is in a state of disrepair, right, by the number of outages you have. So as a fact, the system is in a state of disrepair and needs probably more resources than it currently has. The best information that we have is from the operators, which includes the system operator on the generation side. It includes PREPA and the TND operator. That being said, PREB is also in the middle of a rate case. They're going to be getting some of the same information or asking for some similar information of what the system needs. The board has also retained an independent evaluation because we also want to make sure what the system needs. But we do know as a fact that there is no evaluation of the system needs, and it hasn't been done for over 30 years. And we also know that in 2017, when there was an evaluation in terms of a rate order, the government acknowledged at the time that the resources identified in that rate order would be insufficient to fix the system. So clearly, if the resources in 2017 were not sufficient, they can't be sufficient in 2025. So those are the facts. But again, in terms of the systems operators' numbers for all of them, we have another verification process, and we have PREB looking at it as well. And this is the best information we have at this time.
Can I just add to that?
You did hire a consultant. Can you say who that is?
I don't have the name. I don't have the name of it right now, but we can get it to you. We can get it to you. Yeah,
later. Go ahead.
Can I just follow up on that, because this was a very important to me as a board member. You know, as we've been through a lot of territory on the negotiation with the PREPA bondholders. Excuse me. The main thing is we just wanted as a board another data point. It's not that we've hired somebody to pressure test the numbers because we don't have confidence. The numbers have changed and they've evolved over time as we've gathered more information. So it was important to get another data point to look at the numbers, have somebody independent come in and look at the numbers that would just give us additional information by which we could make sound decisions on moving forward.
Thank you. We have Cyber News.
Saludo.
Hi, Mujica. So the governor has been very vocal, saying that the numbers you put out are incorrect, stating that she's been also very vocal in terms of, even though you addressed it, all right, that they didn't tell her about the contract, that she didn't have time to review the numbers, but especially that the numbers that she believes are erroneous. Is that a concern to you or not? The fact that she could oppose that fiscal plan in court and then become an additional obstacle to reach an agreement? Or does it seem that in the end she will understand the plan, the fiscal plan, and will go with what you are presenting?
The fiscal plan was about over a year in the process. So just understand, this is not something that the board came to in a short time. Over a year, over 50 meetings, including meetings with PREPA, who has all of these numbers. The fiscal plans also undergo an enormous amount of scrutiny. So these are not the fiscal plan. People will review them. People will challenge them. People will scrutinize the figures. As Board Member Nixon pointed out, we look for a lot of different data points on it. And we hope to have continued conversations with the governor to understand where they are. But as we always said, if things change, Act 17 law is still out there. There are changes there, and we will review whether those impact the final determinations, of the plan. But as we stand right now, those are the numbers that we have. We're confident in those numbers. And there will be scrutiny on the fiscal plan, and we'll review what the governor's thoughts are. They have not presented to us any specific changes from the plan.
The issue with the fiscal plan, too, is it's a dynamic document, right? And you operate and it release the fiscal plan with the best information that you have. But the board is going to look at the numbers based upon the data that it has, right? And so I think it's important to understand that we're willing to, as we get more information, to revisit the fiscal plan. But as of right now, it's the best information we have.
I just want to make one point. The reason that we are saying that the system needs all of this investment is because we know that the system is failing, This last year, it got worse, The performance got worse, it culminated in the New Year's Eve blackout, a system of increasing load shed events as well. The system has needs. The plan reflects an x-ray of the system. It is an honest assessment of what the system needs. There'll be debate around that, and obviously, the bondholders have a certain perspective, because the less the system needs, the more is available for their recovery. But the priority here is making sure that the system has the resources over the long term so that it can perform and be reliable in a way that the people of Puerto Rico deserve.
Thank you, Secretary Director. We have no idea.
Mujica, you've been very emphatic on the fact that the power grid has been underfunded for a long time, and there's the chance that the Energy Bureau ends up approving what a so-called constrained budget through the rate process. What are your thoughts on that? On the fact, on the possibility that the Bureau approves budget in that way instead of the optimal budget that the fiscal plan actually reflects?
Yeah. PREP makes the final determination on what the rates would be. What the fiscal plan shows is that if you take into account the system needs and then take into account what the bondholders are requesting, 7 cents plus interest gets you to 10 cents. And then you take into account how much it costs to fund the pension system, 10 cents plus more. There is not enough room in the rate for the system to be affordable for the people of Puerto Rico. So that is what it's saying. PREB will make a determination as to how much the system needs and how much they want to put in the rate. And the question that the plan answers is, how much can you layer on top of that system need and still allow for additional resources to be available for debt recovery? And what the analysis shows is that there is not room to do that.
But how close to the optimal budget does the board believe that the eventual rate should be?
We're not going to second guess what PREB does, right? PREB is an independent regulator. PREB is doing their own analysis. We'll wait for them to do, right, what they're doing. We had to do a fiscal plan. That was the job of the board, and that's what we did.
Okay.
Final question.
Go ahead.
The board at some point last year was beginning an analysis on the possibility of federal funding cuts, of course, with the under the Trump administration. Has the board finished that study, and how much of an impact could those federal funding cuts that have already begun happening, what kind of an impact could it have on Puerto Rico?
I don't recall us saying that we were doing a study of what the impacts of the federal funding cuts. We know how much federal funds the government gets. It's a significant amount of federal funds. We don't know if there are any federal funding cuts yet, right? So there is no determination on, right, what the impacts would be. What we do know is, as I mentioned earlier, 50% of the current budget is federally funded. We do know that. What we also know is that Medicaid expires in 2027, as the governor mentioned. Those are facts. The rest of it is unknown, and us, like all of the other states, are still seeing what happens.
Follow-up question.
Pero entonces, este nuevo presupuesto se va a ver algo.
But will this new budget, will some of that be reflected in this new budget? Because there's uncertainty in those situations. I would suppose that some of that would be taken into account when you budget for the next fiscal year, or am I wrong?
That's a really good point, right? And we can't ignore the risks, the potential risks, right, that are out there. The government is in a far better fiscal position today than it was 8 years ago. Part of that is because of the debt restructurings and also the realignment of the budget. But we haven't done a budget cut in the last 2 years, and we don't envision one again this year. However, with the federal exposure, it is something that we need to take into account. And the limited resources that the government has, whether it's saved resources or growth going forward, we have to take into account the fact that, right, there is risk ahead. And what we don't want is for all the work that we've done over these last 6 years, right, to go away because we didn't manage to those risks. And just to your point, I've been 25 years doing budgets, right? I was a budget director for a long time. And we managed through crises without ever, right, not being able to fund the things we did. And you do that by prudent fiscal management and not ignoring, right, what's coming ahead. And that's why it's a great point. This budget has to take into account the fact that these things could happen and be able to manage it. Otherwise, we're going to be reopening the budget, right, and doing other things that you don't have to do. So guarding our resources for that risk is critically important.
Thank you. We're wrapping up with the last question. Tele 11.
Buenos días. Quiero clarificar algo porque no sé si lo tengo bien.
Good morning. I wanted to clear something up because I don't know if I have it right. In regards to the hiring of PTG partners, it's clear to me that the board is not the one that is managing or proposed the hiring of this firm, but what is your position in regards to those, what the mediators said?
What the mediator said, a statement that was made, or in the application as to the retention? I'm not clear what is.
What is our position?
What is her position on that,
Even though it's not our contract.
on that hiring?
With regard to the mediation, to the contract, do we have a position?
We have, to date, not made a determination as to whether to take a position one way or the other, and we'll have to consult with the lawyers, but ultimately we can't give you a definitive answer now.
We have not objected to it. We have not objected to it as of now.
Okay. Follow up.
No, tenía otra pregunta con relación.
Yes, I had another question in regards to the elimination of the matching fund. Some mayors are saying that when those matching funds are gone, there should be an increase to the funds to vital or essential services and to broaden the scope of that beyond Ama de Llaves, is that a possibility?
I mentioned this in the remarks earlier. The government is now giving the municipalities $350 million. The municipalities are receiving now more money than they received when the equalization fund was in place. It's a fact. However, right, this year we added $89 million. We want to target it to make sure that it's going to provide specific services. Whether or not that funding is recurring next year is a conversation that we will have with the government. And then whether or not there are additional resources, also a conversation. Limited resources, but it's also a conversation with the government if we're going to do that. We recognize the needs of the municipalities, and I know there are some municipalities that are particularly distressed. And we have $35 million in unallocated resources that we could use for that as well. So there's two things here. We want service delivery for municipalities. We want them to deliver the services that the people need the most. We're funding those services. They're getting more money now than they were when the equalization fund was in place. Not all of the municipalities. There's a different distribution, but overall it's a similar amount of funding. But the board has not been opposed in the past to adding funding for municipalities. We just want to make sure that they're being used efficiently.
Thank you. We have a last question, and I think John Marino was asking for it. John?
Hi. I was just wondering if you have commenced meetings with the Commonwealth regarding an external funding source for the PREPA recovery, and if Commonwealth funding is still a possibility.
We have not begun any conversations with regard to that yet.
Is Commonwealth funding still a possibility, including, I guess, the fiscal plan sort of has like, I forget what it is, but nearly $900 million for unreserved needs in the TSA. Would that be something the board would consider?
I think as we said in the fiscal plan, we're going to look for any other resources that are available that we can discuss with the Commonwealth. What the fiscal plan is clear on is that there's insufficient room in the rates to support all of the system needs and the recovery that the bondholders are requesting. But we have not begun those discussions with the government yet.
Okay. Thank you, Robert, Chairman, and board members. We conclude our press conference. Thank you all.
Thank you.